If your vision is big, if you want to do something very, very big in your life, whatever that may be, you want your last name to be a strong legacy last name, you want to raise great kids, you want to go out there and build a business that's multinational, and you're building $1 billion empire, a national business, you want to build a big podcast, you want to build a big show, you want to compete not in the top 1%, but the top 0.1%. Great. You have to be naive to think you're not going to have enemies. Number one, it's absolutely impossible to compete at that level without having enemies, okay? So now, what enemies are not necessary enemies to create? Like I read this one book where the guy says, sometimes in a company, when you don't know it, sometimes you create unnecessary enemies, meaning somebody is about to quit, okay? And it's not going to work out. You have to learn the art of letting them go gently. Okay, the art of letting them go gently does what? It eliminates a future enemy. If you let somebody go in a very abrupt way, which I've done, definitely.
I just did.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens when you do that?
You create an enemy for no reason.
You create an enemy, and it's no reason. So by the way, those types of situations, you look at it and you say, man, I shouldn't have done that. Okay,
pride got in the way, ego got in the way.
And by the way, it happens to all of us. It happens. It's never going to stop. You ain't never going to be, look at it as a free throw shoot. You're never going to shoot 100%, but you want to shoot 80%. Like if you're at 50%, go to 60, 70, 80. You want to be around 80%, which means you're going to make the mistakes 20% of the time. So certain enemies in life, I don't want to compete with my kids. That's not my enemy. I don't want to compete with my siblings. That's not my enemy. I don't want to compete with my parents. That's not my enemy. Maybe your parent is a good driver because your father left you, and that's going to be a driver for you. Your name is Tyler Perry, and that wasn't in the picture. And later on, he shows up when you have all the money in the world, and he says, hey, son, he's like, hey, where were you all this time? Oh, how about you buy me a house? And he says, I'll buy you a house, I'll buy you a car, I'll buy you the other stuff with one caveat. What's that? Never call me again. And he does that. That was his driver. That's his enemy, Steve Jobs. His mother gave him for adoption. Are you kidding me? Like, you give me up for adoption? I'm freaking Steve Jobs. What does Steve Jobs do? Goes and builds a company that's a $3 trillion company today, where 58% of America uses a tool that he built, and he dies at 56 years old. What do you think drove that guy? What drove Kobe? What drove Michael? What was a driver for Michael? What was a driver for some of these guys that are at certain levels that you look at? So we have this very conflicted relationship with enemy, because we look at words like war, negative connotation. It's a bad thing. Enemy, oh, it's a negative thing. It's a bad thing. We look at these words and we're uncomfortable. Even when you were talking about initially a word in our faith where suicide and all that stuff, the way they would explain it, and fear and all that stuff. But for me, every level I've gone, I've had to choose my enemies wisely. And if I've chosen the right enemies, it's brought out the best in me. If I choose the wrong enemies, it's brought out the worst in me. I know for a fact when I chose the wrong enemy, because it makes me look back and it makes me go look at the bitter side, and I resent and I'm living in regret, and those are not the right enemies. Then I know I'm choosing an enemy that's a different target. I'm like, got it. Why the hell am I fighting you? You're my wife. Why are we fighting? You're not the enemy. Why are we fighting? You're not the enemy. What are we doing here? I don't want to fight you. That's the enemy.